Hey, ODTUGers, welcome to Kscope Uncovered. I am your Kscope20 conference chair, Kevin McGinley. And this is a podcast. This is our second episode, a podcast about kind of giving you a little bit of insight into, how Kscope comes together. What is the sort of process that we go through? What are all the sort of different steps that we take? And ultimately give you a sense along the way of how much sort of effort and thought goes into planning Kscope and what you get to experience in June when Kscope happens. And with this being our second episode, let me kind of give you a little bit of update on where we're at from a conference planning perspective, some things that we've done recently. We're in the throes of abstracts being open for submission. So hopefully all of you, as you're hearing this, you've already put some abstracts in or you're thinking about doing it before the close date of December, I think 5th it is off the top of my head. And we'll actually come back to the end and talk about abstracts a little bit. But right now, what we're doing is kind of getting our teams together. So every year there's a team for every track. So we have content chairs on the conference committee. Those content chairs get to pick who they want to have lead their respective tracks that they oversee. And then they, with their track leads, get to recruit who some of the track team members are going to be. To help sift through all those great abstracts that you submit in and, think about which ones will make a really great Kscope experience for all of our attendees. And so we're in the process right now of finalizing those teams. So our track leads have been selected and our teams are being finalized. That'll actually happen later this week. And then from there, those teams will be responsible once we close the abstract submissions for starting to go in and read through all of those great abstracts and vote on them and discuss them and debate them and ultimately come to the final list that we have selected. In addition to that, we're also doing things like kind of planning the experience of Kscope. So one of the things that we just got done doing is picking out what the community service day is going to be. I can't tell you what it is yet. We usually have a big announcement and reveal for that, but that was one thing that we had discussed on our last call, and I'm really looking forward to the place that we selected. I think it's going to be an excellent choice and a lot of fun. If you're able to come into Kscope early, that would be a great and fun thing to attend. And we've got our conference committee on-site planning meeting coming up later this month around, kind of going through the logistics of everything on site. And we'll talk more about that. There'll be another episode, actually, I think right after this one, that'll kind of give you a summary of what we did and what happened during that on-site meeting. But what I think I'd like to do now is introduce my guests. So every time on this podcast, I'll make sure I have at least one person on with me, sometimes multiple. And for this one, I asked former Kscope 18 and 19 conference chair, Opal Alapata, to hop on with me. Opal, welcome to the Kscope Uncovered podcast.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And, so first of all, I just want to start off by why didn't you warn me what this was going to be like?
Yes, there's a certain level of understanding that as conference chairs have that you just can't possibly explain in words.
And I say that in jest because actually all last year Opal did an excellent job of educating me of the entire process along the way. So some of that is a little tongue in cheek because I knew exactly what I was getting into thanks to all the conversations that we had. So appreciate that. But I thought what I'd like to do, you have been in ODTUG for quite a long time in various roles and capacities. And for other people out there who want to get involved in ODTUG and do things like eventually help kind of beyond the conference, Kscope conference planning committee, I think it's helpful to kind of see, what someone like yourself goes through and how you sort of come up the ranks, so to speak, to ultimately get to be, sort of the Kscope in 18 and 19 conference chair. So let's kind of rewind the clock a little bit. When did you first get involved in ODTUG, and how did how did that come to be?
You know what's funny is if I actually think that far back, which was 2012, which for some people is not a lifetime, but it is a very long time in this type of career. I have to say that it came down to just knowing some of the right people at the right time. It was somewhat serendipitous, and it was somewhat a product of me also wanting to be involved in a conference like this. So when I first started my technical conference presenting, my first one was Hyperion Solutions. For those of you in the EPM world, shout out. And that was in 2006. I think it was the very last one they had before Oracle bought Hyperion. And I thought
Yeah.
it was really cool. And when that closed shop, the company that I worked for just really wasn't on the conference circuit that much. So it took me a number of years to find Kscope. And my very first Kscope was 2012 in San Antonio. I had an abstract. Yep. So did that one again, but yep. I had an abstract that was selected, and I happened to have met Cameron Lackpour through the, online communities that existed at the time. And we physically met in person, and he was like, "Hey, we have some volunteer spots open. You seem to be really interested in this." And I was sharing my knowledge through an anonymous technical blog that I won't go into the details about right now. But so, yeah, it was just kind of serendipity of meeting the right people, knowing the right folks who were already involved in ODTUG and ODTUG Kscope. And they asked for my help, and I joined. I loved it, and I just kept going.
So you were one of those track team members for Kscope 12 in San Antonio.
So
You were
not
actually
for 12, no. So what happened was 12 was the first time I really like met folks. And at that time I didn't know that ODTUG was an organization. I just knew that Kscope was a conference. And so I attended, met Cameron at that conference, who then introduced me to some other people, recommended me to be on, I think it was the planning track at the time. And so for 2013, I was actually one of the content selection members on the planning track. And then I just kind of went from there up the ranks.
yeah, and that's a very similar story for me. It's interesting that you mentioned Cameron. Shout out to Cameron if he's listening. But I had a similar experience. So for me, it was Mark Rittman, and
Hmm.
he was the one. I didn't meet him specifically at Kscope. I met him at other events, and he was the one who sort of a recruited me to speak at Kscope in general, but also then asked if I would be on the back then it was the BI track, if you will, and asked me to be on the selection team as well. So very very similar starts, and to me, what that kind of I don't know speaks to is just how important sort of networking is, and when you're at an event like Kscope or any other conference for that matter, taking the time to network with people, interact with people, go to things where you can meet people. I think that's not only good if you aren't going to volunteer, but if you do have an interest in volunteer, getting sort of engaged with that group of people is hugely valuable. Um, so then
Yeah.
you went from track team member. Were you eventually a track lead?
So a little bit of an awkward situation here, but so thanks for that, Kevin. But I kind of jumped and went straight to content share. They saw some really great potential in me as the excuse that I'm going to go with. To be honest, I didn't really know them that well, so it wasn't like it was, like some kind of insider friend thing or something. It was just they really needed volunteers, people they could trust to do the job well. I took it very seriously when I was on the content selection team, and so I think they felt that I was ready. So I actually kind of jumped ahead a little bit and went straight to content share, and I was that for a couple years, then took a couple of other roles, joined the board for a couple of years, and then went to conference chair.
So not to make this, just to kind of explain to everybody what we sort of mean by that. So generally speaking, the natural progression that we look for is track team member to content or track team lead to content chair after that. So you got to sort of skip that track lead step. That does happen from time to time because sometimes, we do ask, that people kind of put in a set amount of time and then sort of roll off to let other people get a chance. And, sometimes we are, this is a volunteer effort, right? Sometimes people have lives that get in the way and careers that get in the way, and we sometimes get a little caught between a rock and a hard place and need to sort of bend the rules a little bit there. So I don't
And
think that's terribly bad that or awkward that you did that jump. That happens from time to time.
no, and I honestly like in that time frame, I think it probably would have been frowned upon. It's just, it was just a kind of a little bit of a different world then back in the EPM days of those days. But I will also add to what you just said, which is, and sometimes, folks are added directly to the conference committee and not a content selection role necessarily because they have other skills that we need to
Yep.
broaden the conference committee. So yeah, there's many different variables to that. So I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah. So then, think back to what it was like when you attended your first conference committee meeting. So I think I said in the last podcast, we try to meet, at a minimum a biweekly. Sometimes when it gets a little bit busy and intense, we might up it to weekly, but, we have biweekly calls where, from roughly August through the beginning of June, we're still sort of regularly planning Kscope. Do you remember the first conference meeting you attended and what it felt like?
Oh boy. Yeah, so second awkward spot. Okay. Yeah. So back
We
then,
totally didn't plan this very well, did
I
we?
know we
This
did
is
not plan this in advance, by the way.
completely off the cuff, and I am imagining that I am happening to pick all the wrong questions to ask you. Fan,
No, but you know what? Nothing is ever perfect, right? Like no
that's right.
experience is ever perfect, and you can never know what you're going to get. So back in those days, things were not necessarily as organized as they are today. And I remember not very much about my very first conference committee meeting, but do remember thinking for the first few years, I don't exactly know what's going on. And it wasn't necessarily a reflection of the conference committee. It's just that there were so many people that were involved that had been involved for so many years that it was a little bit odd to bring in a newcomer who was, fairly new to ODTUG and Kscope in general. And so I kind of had to figure it out, as I went along and just try to understand who are the key players, what exactly are they doing in this conference committee, what exactly is my role, how can I add value. So it was a definitely an eye-opening experience, but fun for the first few years.
Yeah, and I don't, I think mine was similar. I mean, there's definitely a lot that goes into this, and it can be a little overwhelming at first. And I can even tell you with the people who are new to my conference committee this year. I mean, I think they're experiencing a little of the same thing. There's a lot that goes into this, and certainly for people who have been through it before, there's a I don't know, there's a element of, okay, I know exactly now, at least at a sort of maybe 10,000 foot level, what to expect. So it's perhaps not quite as you know wow, this is a lot to digest, but
Right.
I don't know. That's how mine was too. I kind of, and there's unfortunately there's not like, YCC does a great job of taking us through, kind of the yearly plan, and there are to a certain extent things that we rinse and repeat and do every year, but it's not like there's also all these cookie cutters out there that tell you exactly what to do and when to do it, depending on what your role is. It's not always that. Um, as well defined as some of us would like it to be.
And for some of us, or actually many of us, I would dare to say, in this type of technical industry, most of us have never planned something like this for thousands of attendees. And so
Yeah.
you're never kind of prepared for that because you have no idea, how deep it goes and how many decisions you have to make. and of course how to collaborate, right, with people that you may or may not know that offer very different perspectives in the technical communities that they represent. So there's a lot that you're dealing with on a conference committee, and much of it is very, very positive and fun, and that's
Oh
obviously the
yeah.
goal of the conference chair. But it's eye-opening for sure.
It is. That's a perfect term. I think eye-opening is a great way to put it because, um, I think for most people that get onto the committee, it's definitely you don't realize how much happens behind the scene, and that's kind of, partly why I wanted to do this a little bit is to just sort of, peel back the curtain a little bit on some of the stuff that we do. Obviously, we can't talk about everything we do at the minutia that we do it, and some stuff we hold back because we like to have big reveals. But I think providing a little visibility to that is I think eye opening for people who attend Kscope as well. Um, so with that, I'm going to transition a little bit to so you just got not just, but you wrapped up Kscope 19. You got to sort of wipe your hands and sort of walk away. How do you look back on Kscope 19, and how do you feel about how it went, and what were some of the things that stuck with you about what you really liked about it, and what's it sort of feel like now that you're kind of in quasi retirement, if you will?
Right. Um, so what I will say, and it's interesting because I've been, at Kscope for 7, 8 years in a row now, and I'm very privileged to have had that experience, by the way. I know it's difficult for a lot of folks to get to a traveling conference. What I would say is my experiences in the very beginning of the Kscope conference versus what I remember and take away recently from the Kscope conference are very different. So when I first attended, I'd been in the Hyperion Oracle EPM world for many years already, but I was there as a technical geek, absorbing as much as I could, meeting as many people as I could, but really I was there to learn and present. And now that I'm at the end of my ODTUG career, what I really value most from the last few conferences is really just the experience that I share with people, just the networking, the different, little social parties and gatherings and events that we went to. And I can tell you, Kevin, because you were there, but what I will remember most about Kscope 19 were those, little social gatherings that we had like after the conference or, the nights before the conference started, where we just kind of all got together and kind of unloaded and just kind of, talked as a group of people who were just genuinely enjoying each other's experiences. But that's what I remember. That's what I'll take away is that networking, that part, and just being with friends and enjoying being together. And I wholeheartedly mean that, by the way. It's something that I tried to capture in my blog posts. I always do a review of Kscope in my blog post since I started that blog. I'll just say that.
Yep.
And I try to capture that, but it's difficult to put that into words.
It is. I mean, and I don't know. That's what you just sort of articulated is what keeps me coming back as well. Because I like last year, I didn't get to attend many sessions and learn about this feature or that technique or this tip. But I still had awesome conversations with that social network and the things that you discuss and learn in those conversations, some of which are specific to your industry or your what you're focused on as a professional. Some of them are also just sort of worldly things too, right? I mean, those are incredibly valuable, and it's really hard to get that anywhere else in life. And so yeah, I'm right with you there. That's those are the things that I really sort of like and take away from. Um, yes. So what are you looking forward to about 20?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to lie, the comparison of me as conference chair to future conference chair, really excited to see how you translate this. But I also, for me, one of the biggest things is always the location. That's kind of like the the third character in the background that just kind of disappears during one of our conferences. But just being in Boston, just I've never had a Kscope experience in Boston. I love Boston. I've had many years of projects there in my past career, and
Yep.
just kind of seeing how that translates to that landscape. I'm very, very excited about that and what you guys come up with for all the different events.
Well, we have a
No
lot
pressure.
planned. Some of it, I think we'll go. No, I'm just kidding. We're excited about all the things that we're doing, and I think as you tried to do, I'm following your great lead when it comes to hey, every Kscope is not going to be exactly the same. Part of it is the different city, as you pointed out. We'll always add a little bit of nuance and character to each Kscope and make it a little bit different, but also the conference world is evolving, and we need to evolve with it, and that means doing different things, trying different things, and some of which sometimes don't always work as you had hoped, and sort of revisit those and try again. But like one thing that you started that I'm really excited about is testing the waters on session lengths that are different than 60 minutes. So that's something that we're going to be doing this year. Might it's definitely a hard thing to do on a larger scale than just
Yep.
sort of one 30-minute session block. So you're
Right.
probably wondering how the heck is he going to do that? But we're going to try, and we'll see how that goes. So yeah, 30-minute sessions, 90-minute sessions. We're really pushing the envelope here. So we'll see. So speaking of sessions, one of the things that you've done in the past very well that I've always appreciated has had a lot of great ideas that you've articulated around how someone can get, if they want to speak at Kscope, what are some good tips and techniques for getting their session idea selected by the track team. So would you mind, what are your, I won't give you a number or make you hit a number,
Right.
but what are some of
Hmm.
your top tips for what you like, or what
Yeah.
you look
Okay.
for in abstracts?
Well, okay. So, and just for those of you who have never, ever, ever read a blog post on this, I will tell you that for the last, gosh, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years, I've either written about this particular subject on the ODTUG blog site or on my own personal blog, and also aggregated other people's blogs and thoughts and wisdom on the subject. So what I'll say is, instead of just rehashing everything that I put there, but I highly recommend you guys go read that stuff, and even the webcast that ODTUG's been pushing, that Natalie and Danny did a couple years ago, is, to me, it boils down to a couple things, which is A, know your community. So we have different track teams that are running the content selection. They all work differently. And these are people who are hand selected based on their leadership abilities and their technical wisdom of that particular community. So these are folks who are intimately familiar with that particular ODTUG community, and they know what works for that community. So for instance, I'll speak to EPM because that's where I'm from. The EPM group is very interesting. I jokingly and affectionately, don't take this personally, refer to us as the divas of ODTUG. I think we're a fun bunch, but we're also a very competitive bunch. And so you have to really get noticed in the EPM tracks. And so I believe in clickbaity titles. I believe in promising what you preach when you actually deliver your session. And I believe in being very transparent about what you are going to show people and teach them. So that would be one thing, is definitely know your community and make sure that you write your abstract for that community, and follow, the cultural norms of that community. And if you don't know what that community is, you can look at past Kscope websites, kscope19.odtug.com, or whatever it is should be out there. You can go look at past abstracts to see what was finally selected. If you have an ODTUG membership, you should be able to look at past sessions. You can view them through the website and the archives, so you should get a feel for what that community is. The second thing, which is a little bit of a controversial subject, and I mention in every single blog, but I have to mention again because I know that it will work against you if you have, the type of person who cares about this reviewing your abstract. But there are two boxes, and I've said this a million times through many different channels. There are two boxes that you have to put details about your abstract in. One is the summary that all the people who look at the content on the website will see. So basically, attendee version of the abstract, what actually gets published that people want to read to see if they want to come to your session. And then the second box is not the same box. It is notes to the review committee, which is, okay, what are you really going to tell that attendee session? Like, what are you really going to go through? Like, is this just a replay of what you did last year or at a different conference, or what's really in here that we need to know as a reviewer abstract? And I hate to say this, it's such a little semantics thing, but do not copy and paste from the first box to the second box because, and I say this because there are some review folks who immediately downgrade your abstract, and it's just so silly, but they will do it. And so I don't want anyone to get punished for not following the rules. So that's tip number 2 that I spent a lot of time on because it's very important. And then tip number 3 is, if you honestly are out of ideas on what to present, what do you want to know? What is it that you would like to go to this conference? What would you pay to see at this conference? And be careful, it can be some niche thing that only 1% of attendees are going to want to listen to. But it has to be something that's appealing to a broader audience. But what in the world would you pay to see? And then submit it, because guess what? If it gets accepted, you actually have to learn that and then present it to everybody else, which would be totally cool. So, twofer, basically. So yeah, those are the 3 tips that I would give.
I was laughing at the second one because I imagine somewhere out in the sort of universe of things, there is a list, top 10, I don't know, pick a number, list of things that we talk about on the conference committee every
Right.
single year.
Yes,
And
every single year.
list, we literally just talked about this on our last call. So yes, please, 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 for the love of Pete, uh, do not copy and paste between those 2 boxes, because I will back up what Opal just said. There are literally people who will eliminate you based on that alone. Because it
Yes.
comes down to effort, right? Like, they want to know that you've put some thought into this, and that have what it takes to kind of do all the work that's required to present a really good session at Kscope. It's not just about following the rules. It's about you demonstrating your effort, and your sort of that you've put a lot of thought into what your ideas are for a given session. So, all right. Well, hey, this has been a fun conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is fun. Just like you said, it really was fun.
Yes. Well, and that I like doing this just sort of as we demonstrated earlier by not having fully prepared for this. It's
Right.
more just like a conversation, like we're sitting, at a bar or dinner, just having a chat. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to do it. I really appreciate it. And for all you OD tuggers out there, this series will live on, so there will be more episodes coming throughout the year leading up to Kscope20. So hopefully you find this interesting and entertaining enough to keep listening, and if you do, you'll get to learn a lot about how your favorite conference on earth is planned every year. So with that, I will sign off. Opal, thanks again. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you. All right. Bye, everyone.